welcome back to the channel. We're here once again with my 1995 Ford Escort wagon. If this is your first visit to the channel, there's a playlist for this thing, which I will link right up here and also down in the description so you can go get all caught up if you want. This video is part of an ongoing series to do a whole lot of repair work on this car all at the same time, and today's video is going to be steering and suspension. That may sound like a lot to cover at the same time, and I will try and break it out as well as I can, but they run so close together that it kind of makes sense to do it all at once. So if there's one particular thing you want to see, like you want to know how to replace a ball joint or a tie rod end or whatever, I'll try and timestamp those down in the description for you so you don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. But the long and short of thing is we're going to be doing all 4 quick struts, so that's new struts, full assembly, springs, all of it. Inner and outer tie rod ends, ball joints, anti-sway bar end links, maybe a bushing or two if we find some bad ones, but that's the plan. And to do that, I got a whole mountain of parts over here. For the most part, I've had pretty good luck with Moog steering and suspension parts. I've read assorted reviews from other people. They don't have as good a luck, but I've never really had big problems with them. So that is primarily what I'm going to be using for steering and suspension. For struts, I've long been using Unity strut assemblies. These are just eBay struts, and they work great, so I've never bothered to do anything else. This will be the 3rd set I've installed in an Escort. My only particular worry is the rear strut springs may not work out for us because this is a wagon, and the aftermarket, unless you want to spend a lot of money, doesn't seem to support wagon versus sedan or coupe springs. So once I get them swapped out, I'm not going to throw my old ones away. I'm going to try and preserve the springs, and we'll just see if the car sits weird or whatever over time. So other than the struts, we're trying to use pretty high quality parts here. I'm using these because I don't have any reason not to use them, and they're just dirt cheap. At least they used to be. I bought these like 4 years ago. You may notice some things have already happened without you being here. The caliper has come off, the disc has come off. I've taken 2 of these 17mm heads out of the strut to spindle connection, so the spindle is now free from the strut, and I've got the nut for the axle free. Now, if you're not doing your axles, clearly you don't need to have this axle nut free. That's just the condition of where it is now because that's what I'm doing. And also, you would probably not just have your caliper sitting down there in a pan. You would have it over here. I found like a 5-gallon bucket upside down works nicely. Just is almost the perfect height and size to just sit here and be a good place for your caliper to hang out. Your caliper hoses are actually clipped into the strut. So to replace the strut, you've got to move the hose out from the strut and all that stuff. And obviously you don't want to wire it up to the strut if you're trying to pull a strut out. So I think just because it'll be fun and quick and easy and kind of get it out of my way and be dramatic, I'm just going to go ahead and finish removing the strut. Also worth noting, struts don't come with new bolts. To my shock and surprise, these bolts actually look basically brand new. All the plating and everything's still nice. The tops look like crap. These nuts are specialty lock nuts, but I suppose there's nothing that stops you from just dunking them in red Loctite and reusing them. If yours are in nice shape like these happen to be, I'm actually not going to reuse these. I buy specialty replacements from McMaster Car, and I've got a whole big bucket of them. So unless for some reason I miscounted and I'm going to run out, I am going to put all new bolts in my struts. Because you really don't want these coming apart going down the road, because you're probably going to die, or at least it's not going to go well. Anyhow, to the top we go. Removing the strut from the top is about as easy as you please. Just for fun, I'm going to try it with my M12 Impact just to see if it'll do it. All right, go for you. Yeah. Well, I'll be. All right. I'm going to leave those 2 on just loosely so the strut doesn't just go crashing to the floor here in a second and into my drain pan and make a big mess and piss me off. Get under the car and give her a little jiggly. So you don't want to be moving. It's a little weird. It's hopelessly rusted in place. Oh, I know why. Those sneaky buzzards put another 14 down under there. It's been about 12 years since I did struts on one of these cars that had air conditioning, so pardon me for forgetting that. And that's an air conditioning hose, by the way. That's why I say that. There we go, that's what I'm talking about. So this guy I'm going to want to hang on to because the new struts are probably not going to come with him, although he's probably the same as the other ones. He is not. The pair that go there are a unique height. Or actually, just the one that goes on top is unique. So the guy that goes on top is just mildly shorter than the other 4 nuts, which is weird. So anyway, make sure I hang on to that guy. Now me strut should be wanting to come out. Get under here and hang on to her a little. Okay. Oh yeah. No, and she's a crusty bastard. Now's as good of time as any to talk about why I like to do quick strut assemblies. So why I don't just replace the strut and reuse the strut mount and all that crap and reuse the spring. As you can see, this strut mount is completely whipped already. And you could actually see that under the hood in the car. This is all dry rotted and cracked out and everything. And the strut, since these are McPherson struts, actually turns in this mount. So when you steer the tire, this whole thing is steered. Also, don't be alarmed by the water on the top. That's expected from a different project. So anyway, on a McPherson strut car, this is actually part of your steering. So it's a wear item, it goes away, it wears out, get a new one. Also, for whatever reason, it seems these cars really like to break coil springs. It might be because of our weather. You can see how just rusty and gross and everything that is. The last one of these I did, I think both front or both rear springs had broken coils. Broken just like that one is. This is the right rear, and I'd say she's lost, I think maybe 2 coils from the way that's looking. Can't be positive, but at least 1 coil is broken right in half. So that is one of the reasons I always do quick strut assemblies. Just bang them in, and usually there's not much of an issue. So now that it's out of the car, kind of the long and short answer for why I do that is because all this stuff is old as hell and all whipped. These cars are kind of surprising, at least to me. I mean, they are cheap little economy cars, but they drive and ride pretty decent for what they are. I think that's primarily just because they're so lightweight, but the steering and suspension on one of these things will be completely smoked, and you'll think it'll drive fine until you replace it all, and then these things actually drive like nice. Anyway, getting all this old crap out of there for, I think these are like 50 bucks a corner. It's kind of a no-brainer, just gone. Plus, when you do quick strut assemblies, which by the way, that's actually what they're called quick struts, because it's quick. It's 6 bolts and this thing's out of your way. You also didn't need to mess around with any kind of strut compressors or spring compressors. Just take all this and off to the trash it goes. So it's also a really safe procedure to service your struts this way because there's no risk of you getting punched in the face by that springer. Next item up for bids, which I am never thrilled about doing, is getting that frickin' cotter pin out of the tie rod end. And I'm gonna have the same problem down the ball joint too. For whatever reason, those things just fight me tooth and nail the whole way. And it looks like the orientation of that one is completely horrible to have access to it. So it's installed this way, so it's pointing at the spindle. So if you gotta beat on it with a hammer and punch, you can't. I always have a huge problem with these things. That's why whenever I work on something, I don't use the cotter pins that come with the replacement parts. I put stainless steel cotter pins in. It at least takes them a few more years to get rusty. So that is going to be my next disaster, is messing with that. And I will try and get on there with some side cuts and all the stuff and all the tricks that you see everybody else do. It's probably not going to work because it never works for me. The camera loves to make me a liar, so hopefully by saying that'll never come off, it'll come off real easy. Oh, and I forgot the ball joints don't actually have cotter pins in them, which is cool. So I just have to worry about that guy right there. All right, so we're gonna try one of my dad's tricks here, which has never worked before, and today is probably not gonna be the day that it's gonna work for me. Sure enough, all that pin was gonna do was break, so I did. So the little ears of the pin are now gone, but it is still in the castle portion of the castle nut. My dad has told me before, he's like, yeah, I just break those things off and then just hit them with the impact gun and the nut will just rip right through those. This has never once worked for me. We're gonna try it anyway, because every other option sucks more, so. All right, here goes, probably literally nothing. I'll be damned. I just had to talk enough trash about it never going easy for me. I told you the camera loves to make me a liar. I think the tie rod's even gonna jump out of there for us. Anyway, before I do that, I need to get this jam nut back here broke free so we can later on unscrew the outer from the inner. Anyway, I can't believe that worked. First time ever. I'm gonna talk so much garbage on the other side. I hadn't planned to record both sides, but now I have to. I'm gonna guess that jam nut's a 14, and I'm wrong. It is like a 17. Yep, 17. At least that half of it is. Both halves of it are. Okay. It is kind of nice and kind of annoying when manufacturers do things like make both things the same size. It's kind of annoying because then you need 2 wrenches. And it's kind of nice because you just know what it is then. And what I'm doing here is I've got those 2 wrenches opposed to each other so I can just squeeze them and break that nut loose. What I don't want to do is put stress on the rack. There we go. If I can help it anyway. Well, I guess it wouldn't because the tie rod would turn in there, which is what it's doing now. Anyway, nut's coming loose. Very conveniently spun itself to where I can't reach it. That'll happen when you only have half your suspension. Well, really not even. Anyway, at this point it's probably easier to knock the ball joint out and just spin it off because that nut's broken free. Or, sorry, tie rod. And again, I'm not going to reuse this, so I'm not going to worry about marring up the threads down here. I'm just hoping I can whack it once or twice good and it'll jump out of there. Maybe I should just break this dust shield off. Okay, well, she ain't gonna just jump out of there. It's all right, of all the things to fight with, this would be one I would pick if I got the choice. All right, so of the methods at my disposal, what I could find is the old pickle fork. And this does tear up the boots, but I don't care because I'm replacing this. Somewhere around here, I do have a ball joint press, or a tie rod end press, which is like a little C-clamp thing with a screw that comes up and will actually push on that stud. So if this doesn't work, I'll see if I can dig that guy up. But this guy's probably gonna work. Should get another one of these pickle forks so I can saw it off. A little long for this job. Dang, she wants to be in there. There it goes. Dun-dun-dun. All right, welcome to the passenger side where I found my tie rod end press. It was hiding in the drawer where I keep all my other press tools. Who would have thought? The idea here is pretty straightforward. This guy just has hooks that go on top of your steering arm. That guy actually presses against the hook on the ball joint. And I'm sure if I read the instructions, they would say not to use impact tools, but you know, we're totally going to use impact tools. I am strapped with some iPro though, just to be safe. And I'm going to try not to take it real seriously here. Really what I'd like to do is just put some tension on this and then just whack it with a hammer and see if it'll blast apart. This press is too big for this steering knuckle, I think. I think it's going to want to be slipping off there. We'll give it, see if it'll take a little more. Nah, it's just dropping off. See if I can reposition it. Yeah, I don't think so. But we'll see. Come on, meow. Yeah, I don't know if these are sold in different sizes or what. I think this is just the one Harbor Freight had the day I was in Harbor Freight. If I can get a smaller one, I probably will. Let's try that, see if it works a little better for me. Nah. I'm just going to totally set this up wrong and see if I get lucky anyway, but I doubt it. I think the simple fact is the steering arm's just too small for this puller. Well, I admit that was a potentially dangerous and somewhat dumb way to set this thing up, but if it works, is it really dumb? Basically what I did was that, and it was really only catching on just this one ear. So, and there's a little better illustration that this thing is just a little too big for this knuckle. But this is the right tool to use if you're looking to save your tie rod end when you disassemble stuff. And I will dig around a little and see if I can get a smaller one. We can just unthread it from the inner tie rod end. Wow, there's actually anti-seize on that, I think. If that's true, then somebody has replaced these before. I can't hardly believe that. A million turns later, we'll get there. Yeah, there's anti-seize or grease. Unless the factory did that. Boy, with 85,000 miles, would this thing have worn out ball joints before once? I don't see any identifiable marks or anything on it, but you can see the cotter pin is still in it. Still can't believe that worked. Awesome that did. All right, so she gone. The next thing I'm gonna do is compare this guy to my new one to see if they're the exact same length, because if they are, and I can get the steering close, I'm better off to get it close than to have it way out to drive it to the alignment shop. That's one thing I don't do is my own alignments. A lot of people do that. I'm not one of those people, especially on stuff with McPherson struts, because you can change literally every dimension. And I'm just not going to tape measure one of these things for like 2 hours trying to do that right. I will just take it somewhere and pay the $100. Here you can see old and busted versus new hotness. If I align them on the center line, as well as I can anyway, they are almost perfectly the same length. So my goal here is to not adulterate the locking nut down there on the inner any more than I already have. So once I get the inner off the rack, I can actually measure this stuff and get it reasonably close. Also of note, one of the reasons I like to run Moog stuff is because it's all serviceable. So once we get this all installed, or maybe before I install it, because sometimes it doesn't go well, you put the grease zerk in it and then you have a greasable steering. Which the factory, and I'm going to assume this is factory, just for whatever reason, the NICs or factory grease or whatever held up in the first time of the 3 of these cars I've worked on. But anyway, the factory one is not. No grease, which is why it failed at 85,000 miles, but it is also more than old enough to go buy its own beer. Anyway, trash can. Ah, there goes my scholarship. All right, let's see if we got enough play in the knuckle to get it off of the half shaft now. Sort of doubt it, but it'd be cool if we did. Oh, almost. Come on, baby. Come on. There we go. All right, got the half shaft out of the knuckle. I think I may have a bad wheel bearing up here. Yeah, she got some slop in her. Yeah, damn it. That super sucks because these are hard to service. You got to press the bearings in and out. Yeah, that guy's roached. Way too much movement in him. Well, since I have no other options anyway, I'm going to compare that to the other side when I get there, but I got a feeling this guy's bad. If that's the case, I'll have to tear all this crap back off again later because I don't have a press to do these. But for now, the next thing I'm going to do is get that ball joint out of there. It's held onto the A-arm with a nut and a bolt, and I think maybe one of the one pointing down is a stud. And it's held onto the knuckle with a nut and a bolt that runs across this pin. And then the knuckle should lift right off of it. So I'm probably going to take the knuckle off first just to get some of this crap out of my way. And then we'll buzz those two out and the ball joint will be off. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I just hit the first snaggerelli of this whole job. This bolt, I got it to turn by beating on it with the impact gun over here. But when I was laying on it with that mini sledge on the other side, I actually bent the nut and cocked it on there. So that nut's never coming off again. So I got to get in here with the cutoff wheel and just whoop, cut that bolt off. That's okay because another job for the cutoff wheel is going to be to cut this anti-sway bar end link off as well. The one on the other side's been missing since I bought the car, I think. Anyway, it's strapped up with a little bit of protection. Make sure this is not going to blow apart on me. Well, at least not at first kiss it wasn't. Right on through she went. I couldn't see anything while that was going on, so let's hope I cut through the right thing. Yep, looks like I cut through the right thing. You turd. Is the burr gonna hang it up now? I talk about a wheel kit or an angle kit. All the drift car. Yeah, that was way easier than I thought it was gonna be. Okay. So out she went. Ah, another miss. May or may not need the pickle fork again, but the idea is that guy comes off of the knuckle. I'm thinking a little bit of WD-40 is a good idea here. Probably should have done that before. And again, I'm replacing this lower ball joint, so I'm not worried about tearing up this boot or anything by using the old pickle fork, which it's totally going to tear up the boot. What I also don't want to do is run the pickle fork into the suspension arm. I want to try and be mindful of that. I think I'm good right there. It's coming, I can see it. Thought it was anyway. Maybe not. Dang, she's on there. It's not a great idea to do this real hard, but I'm gonna take the pickle fork right in this gap in that crack where it compresses and see if I can just loosen it up a little bit. It's a good way to break this knuckle and the pickle fork. I don't really want to break either of them. Also don't really want to put a hammer into my fender, but we'll see. Yeah, don't think I'm doing anything really. Well, let's just try again. I get her? Not yet. Dang. All right, you guys know the deal. I'll wrestle with this for a little bit and update you once I figure it out. I think I would prefer to work on this not bolted to the car, so I'm just gonna try and get the ball joint off of the A-arm here. So this guy is a stud. That guy might be a through bolt. Yeah, that guy's got nothing on the bottom. I'm gonna guess those are 17s. Yep. Ooh, that one was crusty. And this guy's a bolt, so it's probably not gonna get that lucky. No, it's just spinning the nut. Okay, shouldn't be anything holding this guy on except maybe some crust back there. There we go. I'm gonna take this somewhere where I can get a little better loving at it. So what I ended up doing is just taking it up here to the bench where I could get a good schwack on it. That guy used to still be in the hole. I just took this cold chisel, gave it 1 or 2 decent-ish taps, and then got on this guy and it came right out. The chisel isn't even in there all that hard. So I just spread it open just a little bit. Now I can cry rivers about what I'm going to do about that wheel bearing. And you can see what I was saying about this dust shield now. Just completely whipped. Just go ahead and finish the job on that. It's not doing anything anymore. The hour is starting to get just a little bit late here, so I am going to go ahead and take the whiz wheel and bust that guy out of there before it gets any more late. Just want to make sure I wasn't actually cutting through something I didn't want to. Getting hard to see through all the rubber smoke. If I'm lucky. Yep, cool. Garage door open and get the smoke out of here. Man. The next thing I'm going to need to do is get this boot off of the rack. Those are the original boots and everything else, and I know that because it's got like a metal zip tie holding it onto the rack that I'm gonna have to cut, which is gonna be a little bit of fun. This guy is just a regular clamp. Oh crap, and I just thought about it. I am gonna have to move that nut. That nut is gonna have to come off to get the boot slid on down. So I guess we're just gonna have to try and take a measurement of where the nut was. It's near enough to 30 millimeters that I'm just gonna call it 30. It's probably, by the time it was tight, probably more like 29. Ugh, got my calipers all crunchy. You regular channel viewers may have noticed I use Michitoyos in the house and use Harbor Freight in the shop, and this is why. Now the other side of that bellows, I don't even think I can take you with me, but right in the middle of the picture is this steel band that holds it to the rack. I need to get under there and cut that steel band without cutting the boot, which is going to be kind of fun. I was hoping I could actually reach in from the top and do it because I can see where they crimped it. The crimp is actually on the bottom portion of it. That's where I would want to cut it, but there's no way I can get my hand down in there. Actually, I might be able to reach in there and grab it with a pair of tin snips. You can see it just there on your left. That's the guy I'm going for. Tried this a minute ago with a pair of flush cutters, but they were just too wussy to do the job. What I can tell you is I'm going to need both hands, so you know the drill. So these guys are simply just too thick to get in there and get close enough to cut it off. I'm going to try with a pair of side cuts, but the angle of attack isn't very good on them either. But I don't need much. Nope. But sometimes I get ridiculous. So that didn't work either. As soon as I hit it right there with the Sawzall, it just rotated around. The Sawzall wouldn't cut it. Right before it came off, I was thinking, this is probably the type of thing that's going to make me look like a complete idiot. And that was true. I think I was actually able to get most of the way through that with the side cuts before. Basically, I pushed on it with a screwdriver right there and it just split open. So who knows? What I can say is there's basically still no access to actually like pry the thing off of the rack. So I'm going to take the axle shaft out next because that'll give me a little bit of a pocket to work in. Well, I have excellent access to it now. Like I can put my left hand all the way back in here and I can, of course, come in through this hole with my right, but it does not want to come off the rack. Another sad story is I didn't even think about it wanting to slide down the rest of the tie rod end to come off. I'm wondering if I'm going to end up regretting not buying new boots. I'm going to guess that yes I am. But I'm going to keep working on it and hope I can get it out of there in one piece so I don't delay this any more than is already getting delayed. So I finally got it out of there, and the secret to my success was getting so angry with this thing that I didn't care if I ripped it straight in half and just grabbed on it real hard and pulled, and off it came. I'm sure it is going to be a peach to get it reinstalled, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Another item of note is there's a little straw that connects the boots on both sides, and that is there to keep this thing a mostly sealed, dust-free-ish system, but allow air to pass from side to side, because as one of these compresses when you're steering, the other one is going to be expanding. So these things, do this all the time as you steer, and if they didn't have a way to exchange air, they would just blow off. So you also need to be mindful to get those connected and disconnected and hopefully not break yours pulling it apart like a madman when you get mad at it like I did. I didn't break it, I just got mad at it. But now we are down to just the inner tie rod remaining in there, and if I'm honest, that inner tie rod seems fine, but when you come this far in a job, the only bit of steering and suspension left is the lower A-arm and the rack. You may as well just do it all. The extra 22 bucks or whatever it is for a tie rod end is just not worth skimping out on, in my opinion. The part some guys grimace about is that you have to buy a specialty tool to do it. This is an inner tie rod tool, and all this really is a giant crowfoot inside a tube. And there are just different sizes of crowfoot to grip different sizes of inner tie rod end. So there you can see like the sockets that go in this thing are just a U that are of a specific dimension, and you just turn this outside collar and you can change them out for whatever size you need. I'm going to guess, in fact, I'm going to say for sure, this is the size for an Escort with manual steering because that is the last thing this tool did. I'm also not sure why it's full of mud. I'm gonna guess mud daubers from my old house. Anyway, so I'm gonna take that guy and see if he fits on that guy. And if he does, then we're ready to go. We'll just bust him out of there. On this thing, there doesn't feel like there are any wrench flats on the rack itself. So if something's super tight, just be careful because the last thing you want to do is break your rack. That would be bad news for everyone and no fun for anybody. And this is indeed Escort size. And from this point out, it's just a big socket, really. Oh boy, that's discomforting. There we go. Yeah. And here's our old guy. Maybe someday. Here's our old guy. Quick note since we're here. This is for an Escort with power steering because this car has power steering. Escorts with manual steering, this is actually a little stub that sticks out of there. And there's like a sheet metal locking feature that installs on the rack. And God help you if you got to work on one of those. I've done it once. It was almost impossible to get the sheet metal thing bent off to get the inner tie rod out of it. And 100% impossible to get the new one installed. So what I ended up doing, which at the time was all I knew to do, was a split lock washer here, which these days I would have probably stopped and ordered Nord locks for it, and just boatloads of red Loctite on that stud. And as far as I know until this day, it's still rolling around like that just fine without those sheet metal locks. Certainly not what I would have liked to have done, but it's all I could do, and I can document for sure, I want to say like 60,000 miles it had been that way, and everything's completely fine. So you do you. God help you if you're doing this on a car with manual steering at all though. Sell a car, get one with power steering. But yeah, this tie rod is basically in perfect condition. I would reuse this if I needed to, but got new ones. The thing to do now is compare the new to the old here and hope that they are exactly the same, so we can get it approximately aligned. And it's completely normal and expected for your new ones to be really stiff, and that's why you pay to buy new ones in the first place. They won't be free like that. It'll be tight. But what I'm interested in is overall length. And of course, the overall length of these is different. And there you can see if it's a slightly exaggerated just because you're so zoomed in on it. But I would say the new one's about 3 millimeters longer than the old one. I will actually measure them and determine what that distance really is, but I would say about 3. Yep, almost exactly 3 millimeters. So I think on the old one I measured the distance to be like 30 millimeters. So when I set the nut on this one, I wanted it like 33 to hopefully compensate for that. And since our outers were identical, that should come up pretty close. Close enough to drive it, I don't know, 10 miles to an alignment shop anyway. But the good news is, we're ready to start hanging parts back on the thing. First one's gonna go ahead and just do this inner tie rod because I got it in my hand, why not? Moog does apply some sort of thread locker in there for you already, so no need to add your own. I will get her rand on there and then dig up torque specs and all that. Actually, I think the Moog kit comes with the torque specs. It does, but I'm glad I double checked because comedy. Install new inner tie rod assembly on the rack and torque to 40 to 500 foot-pounds. Pretty sure they mean 40 to 50. I'm gonna check my Schulten book regardless, but I'm thinking like 50 pounds is probably where you wanna be. For some reason, I'm thinking the manual steering version of this car is like 80 foot-pounds or something goofy. Whatever. I'm gonna double check, make sure this is the same size for my tool, and it is. To get her threaded on. There. Now that it's on there, I can kind of move it straight. Something I wasn't sure about too is it's actually machined for a little rib to hold the boot, which is cool. The OE one was that way too. Yeah, this tool is what makes this job possible. Pretty sure when I got this one, I got it from Rock Auto because it was the cheapest place at the time by a good bit, but I want to say it was 50 or 60 bucks. And I want to say if you go to an alignment shop and pay them to do this job, you'll be in it for 300 or 400. And that's in many years ago prices. So definitely worth it if you're up for doing the job yourself. All right, let's dig up a torque wrench and some torque specs. Annoyingly, the Schulten manual just seems to consider the inner tie rod part of the rack and doesn't say. But looking around elsewhere on the interwebs makes it read like 40 to 50 is the factory spec. So I'm gonna go ahead and meet it in the middle at 50 because I don't want it to fall off. Also worth noting, you're gonna want a pretty healthy length extension just to be able to get your work out away from your door or your fender or whatever you're up against. Boy, 50 came up pretty quick. All right then, I guess the next thing to do is wrestle that boot back on and hope for the best. I believe I am going to take some light grease and probably clean that out first. Like maybe just some Vaseline or something put on there and hope it just kind of helps it get over whatever ridge there is in the rack. Because I actually think the rack has a feature molded in it to catch that groove right there. And I may do the same thing with the little air exchange nodule thing there, just to help everything kind of slide back where it wants to be, I hope. And that all went just swimmingly well. I actually ended up using some brake caliper grease because that's what was handy, and I thought it'd probably be safer for the life of the boot anyway. And it basically just jumped on the rack once I put the grease on it, which is a good thing because I didn't for 1 second even consider that I would have to get a zip tie on this thing after I cut that steel zip tie off. Didn't even think about it, wasn't even sure if I had any that would work. I cannot believe my luck that not only did I have zip ties, I have 14-inch name brand Panduit zip ties, so the good stuff. And these are like the 1/4-inch cross-section ones that are super strong. So got that banged out, no big deal. Another thing that was helpful is I did apply just a little bit of grease to the outside of the tie rod just to help get it on in there. So I think the next thing I probably want to tackle, just because I kind of want to do it, is put the outer on and see about getting that measured up right, get the jam nut and stuff put on this. Should be pretty straightforward. So my caliper's set for that 33 millimeters, and I've got the nut backed far enough off that we can get some anti-seize on it as well. So you definitely want to anti-seize all this stuff or you'll never be able to adjust it ever again. Truth be told, I'm probably never ever going to adjust it all again anyway, because that would mean that I would have to replace a steering component, and I really don't see this car wearing this stuff out again. I'm gonna try and do this without getting my calipers all anti-seizy. Okay, that's pretty much zero. Take our ball joint, which was the same length as the factory one, so hopefully we're in the ballpark. Get my wrenches out, snug that guy up, and she'll be good to roll. And of course they are no longer factory size. That's one good reason to replace this stuff both left and right at the same time, is so you don't end up with a car that needs 19 millimeter on one side and 17 on the other and just piss you off for the rest of your life. Speaking of 19 as well? No. Let's grab a 20. Yep, 19 and 20. So although those are kind of ridiculous wrench sizes, at least they are different wrench sizes, back to something I said earlier. There we go. That'll just turn the inner over. So we're just rotating it in its knuckle up there. Get our greaser put in it. Just for safekeeping, I'm going to get the new castle nut put on. And I am just going to use the cotter pin the Moog hardware bag contained. Just for now, because I'm going to be tearing it back off when we fix up that hub. And I found these greaser holes aren't actually threaded. That this top sheet metal thing doesn't have any threads in it, so it's up to you to try and install it nicely to get it threaded. And this thing very clearly doesn't like a 7 millimeter wrench, but it's the best I got. Better than an adjustable wrench, which is normally what I use for this. And mostly I'm just trying to get it installed straight, I hope. Boy, that's getting real tight already. Okay, breaking it off won't help me. So there that is, no big deal. I think we'll get that lower ball joint landed on there next. Moog actually tapped a hole in this thing for a greaser, which is neat. I don't remember them being like that before. What moderately sucks is these threads feel like garbage. It does not want to assemble very nicely. And I also don't particularly know if I want a 90 on this. I suppose it depends on which direction it ends up pointing. Okay, well, I'll play with that for a little while. So I ended up with a trajectory about like so, because it's got to miss the A-arm and it's got to miss the wheel. Not real sure if I like this. I do have some straights I can change it out for later if I don't. One thing I do like, the new hardware they provided are self-locking, but do likes me some Loctite regardless. So let's just get a whole bucket of red on it, because I do not want it to come off. Although it will. Don't let people get you all worried about that red is actually permanent. Although in the quantities I'm using, it might be. So we're lucky enough for these to be, yeah, that's a 19. Okay, I'll be at that for 100 years. And just because I could reach it, let's do this with the old M12. This guy back here is our stud, so I don't need a backup wrench. All right, we'll check the actual torque values on those. 69 to 86 foot-pounds. What a completely weird dimension. I'm just gonna go with 80. You gotta be kidding. The Milwaukee M12 ran it to at least 80. Looks like. Okay, I was actually using it because I didn't want that to happen. I thought that thing was good for like 35 foot-pounds. Oops. Let's see if I need a backup wrench. I bet I do. No, and to my surprise, that's also at 80. And it does actually feel like 80. It's not a Lion torque wrench. It's an impressive accident to have out of this little guy. I didn't think it would do anywhere near that much torque. What is next? If you're thinking I'm procrastinating on putting the axle in, you're right, because I don't want the weight of the axle hanging on the seal at the transmission any longer than I need to, because it's basically not possible to replace that axle seal with the transmission cross member in. In other words, you pretty much just have to pull the transmission if that seal goes bad. So I try to be as nice to it as I can. So I kind of want the spindle out here ready to slip together before we put the axle in, or all at the same time. I guess that makes the next thing the strut. Actually, I may assemble the sway bar end link and just get it in there loose. I don't want to tighten it until I'm done with the job and both wheels are on the ground, but getting it assembled and ready to go seems like a good idea. Fun fact, this car has never had its sway bars functioning in the time I've owned it. Both rear sway bar end links are broken and one of the fronts was broken. I thought they both were, but we found out otherwise. So yeah, when I bought it, they were all that way. So again, these things drive like okay-ish when they're completely whipped. They drive really nice when they're not. All the end-link kits I've ever seen just come as a bag of hardware, so it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure for how to put them together. This is my chosen assemblage for these. Actually, now they're both in the correct orientation. In the past, I used to just anti-seize the ever-living crap out of all this stuff, and then I figured out, hey, these kits are like $8. It's just not even worth worrying about. Just cut them off every time if you need to. They do come with lock nuts. I don't typically worry about anything more than the lock nut. So it's going to look like that coming up from the bottom. Then another rubber bushing and such on top. And just to keep it from falling apart, I'm going to do that for a moment. It's only on like a thread or so. So we should have plenty of wiggle left in it when we're going to do the other side. So I think it is getting to be about hub and half shaft time. But before we do that, I'm going to make one preparation to install the strut that I always like doing on these cars. These cars have a nasty habit of rusting out the strut towers, and they particularly love to do it in the back. In the front, I think they're better shielded for whatever reason, but you can see that's still plenty rusty. I'm just going to take like a fistful of axle grease and smear that around up there just to try and slow that down some. Doesn't need to last forever, but 5 years would be nice. And as you can see, I just greased the bejesus out of everything up there. So that should pickle up pretty nicely. It is Indiana, so it'll find a way to rust no matter what I do, but that should slow things down a touch. I also just unboxed the front struts for apparently the first time ever, and the shipping label on them said 11/8/2017. So they've been hanging out for a hot minute. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and get the hub on this guy, or the knuckle on this guy. But I am going to anti-sneeze him, because we're going to be wanting him to come back off soon, just for good measure. I'm also going to just kind of chuck some in the hole. Just drop him on, like so. We'll just let the ball joint hang on to it for now. Maybe see if I can get the bolt for it started. Fortunately for us, the Moog kit does come with a new bolt there. Pretty sure that's the bolt I cut off earlier. I'm going to do one of my favorite tricks where I'm going to anti-seize the top and Loctite the bottom. Maybe I don't want to put Loctite on this guy because I'm taking it off. If we're going with that approach, we're just going to anti-seize the whole thing then. 100% anti-seized. Now we'll probably have to fidget with this to kind of get it to start. Which way to fidget is the question. My money is fidget ball joint up. This is going to be a bold decision to get this bolt started. We'll take it easy, see if it wants to help itself. Yep, I think. Let's try threading it a little. Hopefully it just kind of threads itself through there. Yep, just saw it cross through. Oh boy, I believe I rolled the threads on that bolt real hard doing that. Oh yeah, I think I screwed up bad. Oh yeah, that doesn't look good at all. Well, we'll see. Might have got too greedy. Yeah, that was a dumb thing to do. I should have got a punch out to align that. We'll see if I have to pay for it or not. See if this nut will just kind of self-clean. Oh, I don't know. This is a locking nut too. Nope, that's way too tight. And we're gonna have to run a die over it. Hilariously, it is still super stiff coming out. What a piece of garbage. All that, screw up the threads on the thing, and it still doesn't want to cooperate. Oh yeah, I super screwed up this bolt. And see if I can run a die over it and help it out, but I would like to get a new one. We'll see if I can do some of both, because you can replace this bolt with the car assembled. You just drive the old one out and put a new one in. So the bolt cleaned up disturbingly well, like the threads look perfect, which means that was probably all metal from the ball joint, which is less scary than it sounds, but still not good. So we don't want to do that again. I am going to go ahead and use this bolt though, because it looks legitimately perfect. So no big deal. Just let's not be as greedy twice. Hopefully we don't need to be. It should be aligned now. Still got an uncomfortable amount of resistance. Let me see if I got a punch that'll help us out, you know. Like, let me see if I can do the right thing the second time. Well, I got this brass guy, which is literally brand new, and he's considerably smaller than the bolt, but fits like perfectly. I've got my old school taper Craftsman that is not tapered enough to be useful. The brass guy actually fits pretty close. Shouldn't make any difference. Let's try it from the other way. Well, there's something going on right at the interface between the split and the spindle, or in the hub. It's clearing the ball joint just fine. There's something it doesn't like right there. I'm not gonna go crazy here. I'm just gonna see if it'll thread past it. Feels like it is. So I'm gonna be doing this for 3 hours. And I'm not encountering a lot of resistance. Like there, I don't even think I'm driving it forward anymore. So I'm gonna try and get it back out of there and anti-seize it and put it back in for good for now. It's picking up junk in the threads again, up top. So the threads out here are fine, which is where the nut's gonna go, so I'm not gonna worry about it. But this is goofy. Anti-seized and back in there and be done with this. Freaking weird. Whatever. It's in there. I do believe it's half shaft time. So the only thing to do at a time like this is strut. So that's what we're gonna do. Give myself a little bit of room, I hope. Just lay that knuckle back out of the way. The strut kit does come with new upper mounting nuts, so we'll definitely want to use the new ones. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of wing this guy on up in here and hopefully be mindful of my CV there, because I don't want to destroy the boots or anything. Get her lined up and just get one of these nuts started just to hang on to it. It looks like, yep, looks like I'll be okay, that it's not gonna come schwack the boot or anything. Get the other 3 put on loosely. So now it's fully self-supporting off the 4 nuts on the top and the 4 studs. Take our knuckle, and again, being mindful of that boot, we're trying to not destroy anything. Got the geometry that was roughly lined up. And take a center punch, or an alignment punch, or whatever you wanna call it, and just use it to pull things into alignment there. Good clearance on the boot and everything. And now I have my new strut hardware that I would normally anti-seize and apply Loctite to, but since this is temporary for right now, I'm not going to do that. We'll catch it in the next round. Grab a screwdriver here, see if I can get that a little better lined up. No reason to be so mean, baby. Come on. Grab another punch here. Oh yeah, that's way out. There we go. That's a little better. Maybe it'll be easier to start with the top one. There we go. There. And these are the proper OEM style serrated flange nuts. And this is all metric 10.9 hardware, which is metric grade 8. Have to order all this stuff from McMaster. It isn't cheap, but I like it a lot better than my car falling apart going down the road. Just like that. I believe getting our tie rod end back home is going to be our next move. And again, the word of the day here is temporary. So normally I would anti-seize this and then Loctite the nut as well as cotter pin it and everything. It is a castle nut, but still Loctite doesn't hurt. And I would also run this down with an impact gun because it's going to be a tapered hole. But I really don't want to do that because I want to be able to get it back apart easily. Right now the struggle I'm having is that's not in a good orientation for me to get it started in the hole without really going for broke. Am I making this too hard on myself? Possibly. Yep, there we go. That's plenty good enough to drive it around the driveway. For right now, we are done with this. Oh, hey, you guys are still here. Due to the on-the-fly problem of this thing requiring an unexpected front wheel bearing during this repair, and the rear suspension being a lot more involved than I thought it would be, I sort of don't have an end for this video. So please enjoy this stock footage of me driving the thing down the highway after all the repairs to it were done. As always, I appreciate you guys stopping in for this video. We'll catch you on the next one. I'm Max, that's Saddington Bear, and we make videos like this all the time. Here are a couple links to some other videos we've made, and we really appreciate you guys stopping in.